So when we don't feel like we're connected to somebody, we find ourselves doing things outside of our own norms or even our own belief systems to make sure that we're accepted.
We've been kind of speaking on people pleasing, right? So let's get right into it on why not necessarily you, but people in general put others first. Let's first speak on that. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, philosophical, great first question. I would say that people pleasing is way more common than people realize.
Okay.
And it's to the point where if you tell someone, or even I, as a therapist, when I tell a client that they're people pleasing, I get one of two reactions. Either I get the first reaction of, oh my gosh, how did you know? And they feel like they've been seen. Or I get the other reaction, like, I don't care what people think. I'm not a people pleaser. And it's like, yes, sweetheart, you are. And then I list always say people please. And they're like, dang, you're right. I am. People pleasing is so common because, first of all, why people do it, it's usually a learned behavior. So when you're growing up, your parents always teach you to do the right thing, right? Even when no one's looking, think of others. And doing the right thing and thinking of others often is about seeing what somebody else needs and trying to meet that need. But the problem is when it's a learned behavior, you're not thinking of what you need. You're learning to put your stuff aside so you can please and make sure somebody else's need is met. So usually it's a learned behavior, and all habits just die hard. Unfortunately, they can die, but they die hard. A little Bruce Willis going on there. So, it's usually learned behavior, and you're looking at the collective whole. The second reason why people put others first, because just general people pleasing, period. People get really uncomfortable thinking about other people being unhappy with them, thinking I'm responsible for, I'm just going to make up a name, for Alex crying, or I could have done something to help Ashley or to help Raekwon, but I didn't do it. And they start to internalize it and judge themselves. So we don't like to feel uncomfortable, right? So we do what we can to feel comfortable and to also feel like we're going to be viewed in a good light. Doesn't it feel good, y'all, when people say, oh, I know Jay, he always looks out for you, or he's such a good listener. They praise you for things that you do for them, which leads us to the third reason why people put others first is performative. Now, that doesn't mean you're doing it just to get praise or just to be looked at in a good light, but it's just the idea of doing things because you feel like it's the right thing to do. And you're always constantly just go, go, go. You're doing things because that's the way you were raised, or that's what society says you should do. You're performing. You're not really looking at why you're doing it, which leads to another reason. The fourth reason why we put other people first, a lot of times it's our belief system. We don't think about who we are and our worth. A lot of times we give advice to other people, or we give grace or forgiveness or compassion to other people, but we don't do it for ourselves because we don't believe we're worthy of it.
So let me just clarify, right? The four reasons you're saying are behavioral, performance, behavioral, performance, patterns, and the fourth one you said, I'm sorry,
is a value,
belief system. Belief system.
Okay, belief system.
Belief system. Okay, so let's equate that to relationships and even marriage, right? And from my personal story and kind of experience, I feel like I equate all four, right, to myself, because I feel like in order to please yourself, right, and I've learned this the hard way, right? And we even say patterns. In order to please yourself, you have to feel like you're pleasing others around you.
Yes.
Right. And feeling like the performance part about it is, let's equate it to relationships. Doing things, performance things, even in the bedroom, buying things, doing we'll even call it in world society simping, right?
Right.
Certain simping things, right? To get a certain like expression from response, yes, response or an expression from your partner, right? To feel like okay, hey, I'm doing these things, which also shows that person views me as potentially being valuable to them.
Yes.
But on the other end of it, I think that what are you getting out of it as a person? What are you receiving out of it? Is it reciprocated, right? And my experience and what I've seen 9 times out of 10 is not. I don't know what you guys feel about that, how you guys feel about that. Do you agree, disagree?
Personally, people are gonna hear this. People hear this a lot from me, but I agree and disagree.
Okay.
I think yes, some of it is about a lot of it, like Shavon said, it's about what the other people think, but also it's about comfortability, like the feeling of we're so I don't Siobhan, I don't know how much of our content you've watched, but I like to go back to things like evolutionary psychology, philosophy, that type of stuff. So I'm gonna jump into that a little bit now. But
Yeah, do it.
I think
Jump into it.
I think from an evolutionary standpoint, we're social creatures. We seek out community, and being disliked from an evolutionary standpoint, being disliked is a good way to find yourself isolated and alone and in a dangerous position, especially when, back in the day. And when I say back in the day, I'm not talking about, the good old days, the 50s, 60s, 70s. I'm talking about like prehistoric times when if you were by yourself in the woods, you would literally die. Like that's what it was. But now, like we still have that in us. That's still part of us. So, from an instinctual perspective, we're all sitting there just like, look, for my survival, I need people to at least like me enough to not throw me into the woods by myself. So we'll do things that are counter to our own personal gain. I think the areas I disagree are, I think we've conditioned ourselves to ignore those instincts to a negative degree.
So let me ask a quick question. Your instincts. Are you because I'm trying to just clarify here. Are you equating instincts to intuition?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Good.
Will
Okay.
So even though we want to be liked, we'll do things that go the opposite way. Before it was okay, we do things to be liked because we want to be part of the group. But now we do things to be liked, even though they can sometimes put us in danger. Meaning we end up with bad partners and bad relationships and in bad mental states because we're doing the things for the sake of likability as opposed to community. Let's say that.
Okay.
I like that. In to give another little perspective, if you will, off what you said. Something you hit on, Jade, that I tell clients all the time is that the human experience is about connectivity. Literally, we thrive off of connection, period. That's why, trigger warning, during the pandemic, suicides increased because isolate. You were isolated. We were all in our houses. Well, most of us, right? I lived in Florida. Florida didn't believe in quarantine. But
Y'all were just out. Yes.
yeah, let me throw it out there. Thanks, DeSantis, not, but we quarantined for a very short period of time. But the nation as a whole was quarantined for a while, right? And you would hear things like people say, I'm going stir crazy because they couldn't get out. Suicides increase and also drug use, which I know you may find kind of weird because you're like, well, where are you getting this from? Like, you're inside. But if you have an addiction, you're going to make sure it gets fed. And the problem is people were home, so they didn't have things to distract them, right? I got an influx personally as a therapist. I got an influx of clients who were in relationships because they realized, oh my gosh, my partner's driving me crazy. I've never been around them for so long. What is going on? So point is, we thrive off connection. So I'm so glad you said that. So when we don't feel like we're connected to somebody, we find ourselves doing things outside of our own norms or even our own belief systems to make sure that we're accepted. Here's the danger of it. That's where you go into codependency a lot of times. And when codependency shows up, that's when the relationship starts to get a little jacked up. Because
sorry, not to interrupt. I'm sorry. Can you define codependency for people who?
Yes.
I was gonna ask that, but I was gonna let her finish. I want to make sure, is codependency mean you start relying on a person more than you rely on yourself? I guess that's kind of what because I would love to hear that answer too.
Okay, so I'm glad y'all said that because sometimes that's a therapy problem. You're so used to certain terms. You're like, oh, everybody knows what this is. And it's like,
okay,
oh, sweetheart, they don't. So thank y'all for stopping me on that. Codependency is not necessarily just relying on somebody else. It is where you actually, and I hate to use a word in a definition, but I have to. It is when you become dependent on that other person in order for you to be able to sustain or to thrive.
Okay.
So when you are codependent, it will look like this. People who are very, very clingy, very attached, they're very insecure. They struggle making decisions without calling their partner or getting their partner's input first. They may be very fearful of the relationship breaking up. So if you're upset with them, they're thinking, oh my gosh, this is it. This is the end. Like, are you trying to break up with me? What's going on? People who are codependent is usually a lack of a secure attachment. Secure attachment looks like this. My husband and I, because I'm actually married, we're together. If he leaves to go to the grocery store, I don't need to call him, right? I know he's going to come back. Now, say if I know my husband, and it sounds so juvenile, but these are real things, right?
Oh, I'm getting ready to explain why they are real things because I have some questions.
Okay. My husband normally spends an hour in the grocery store, but if he's gone for 2, I may become rightfully so concerned and reach out like, hey, just making sure you're okay, but not giving him a 3rd-degree burn. Another example of codependency, because some people it's not that basic, right? It could be something like this.
Okay.
My husband says, hey, I have a work trip and I need to be gone just overnight. And I am like, absolutely not. You're not going, because I feel when he's not physically here, or if he's not within my realm of communication or sight, I withdraw internally. My security starts to go down and I need him around. So codependency is that very unhealthy attachment on someone outside of yourself in order for you to feel secure within yourself.
I have a lot of questions, right? I have a lot of questions. I have a lot of questions about this. First question is, and I'll lump all these questions so we can kind of answer them all, because if not, I'll forget them all. That same insecurity, that same feeling, like we'll even say abandonment, right? Because that's kind of where it starts, right? Mm-hmm. And also that fear of, breaking up. I will say this, right? But it's also a question. It's okay, and I hope I don't get any trouble or any flack for saying this, right? But it is what it is. It is. It's okay for women to do this, right? To a point where I feel like men find that attractive. But when men do it, it's seen as
weak.
weak,
Mm-hmm.
right? Why is that? That's my first question. Second question is that I was that man, right? To a point where I felt like very insecure, very like, don't go anywhere, don't do anything. Even now, sometimes, right? I'm a man that loves my peace and my space, but if my wife is gone for like hours, I'm like, man, it's quiet in this house. You know what I mean? I don't,
Yeah.
I don't get that saying, I don't get that codependency of like, man, I need to call an APB. Where is she at? Sometimes I do, but I know that I know from before I used to think that, you know, and I feel like a lot of men and women do think this way when they're gone a
Put
certain
out the
amount of
bat
time,
signal immediately.
put out the bat signal because it's a trigger to the fact that what's happened to me before, can it happen again? Right.
Yeah.
So to wrap it up into two questions, my first question is, why is it okay for women to do this and men are seen as weak? Second question is it normal, in a way that codependency isn't necessarily such a, it's either, you're not a man, you're weak, but it's a woman's part of her personality to act this way.
Those are some really good questions.
Yeah.
First, I would say, why is it seen as women? It's okay for us. I'm just gonna say be quote unquote clingy, but it's really more codependency than men.
Yeah.
I would say definitely societal construct because from
Ooh,
the
okay.
beginning of times we've been perceived as damsel in distress, right?
Yes.
By nature, men are protectors and they're providers. So
Yes.
in order to be a protector and a provider, you have to be strong. And we
Yes.
normally think of physical strength, but really it's about mental strength. You don't have to be in the gym pumping 500 pounds, deadlifting
Yep.
and all that to be strong, right?
Okay.
So being that y'all are protectors, providers, we're nurturers. When you are a nurturer as a woman, that's usually associated with emotion. Because in order for me to nurture, in order for me to care, I have to be emotionally vulnerable and intimate. Intimate meaning
Okay.
bearing yourself open, right? Going in
Okay.
deep with others. So
Okay.
when naturally we have more emotions, it is expressed more. And so if we miss you, it's, oh, I miss you, and you expect us to be all over you. But men, and it's so frustrating, but y'all are not afforded that same opportunity technically to
No,
be
we're not.
as emotionally vulnerable and intimate and expressive. So y'all should be, according to society, a little bit more hardened and feel comfortable with not being around your woman because you're also conditioned to know that we're replaceable. Even if you feel, even if you feel like we are one in a million, if you will, if you
Yeah.
come across the right one, and I use that very loosely, still as women are expendable, like it's a dime a dozen, right? But as women, we're taught when you get a good man, girl, you better hold on to him because they don't come around that often, not the good ones, because you should expect from men to not be as committed. Right?
You don't feel some women, not to cut you off, you don't feel like some women feel like men are expendable also?
Now, yes,
Okay. Okay.
times are changing, with
Okay. What are
women
your thoughts
becoming
on
more
that?
empowered.
Oh, okay. Okay. Okay.
Like, why do I think it, or do I agree with it?
Do you feel it's a good thing, it's a bad thing, or are we going down a path that it can really harm relationships and marriages? What are your thoughts on this? Just not to get off track, but
No, it's fine. I love this conversation. I think the good thing about it is the root of it. Because I'm a
okay.
therapist, I'm gonna say screw the surface. I want to get to the meat and potatoes, the bones of it, right?
Okay.
The bones of women feeling like men are more expendable nowadays is just literally empowerment. If you want to call it feminism, if you want to call it liberation, whatever you want to put, whatever title on it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think it's good that we're realizing our worth is not tied up on who's in our bed anymore or how productive we wait, we're realizing it, but not everyone believes it. But we're realizing it, right? But where I
Yeah.
feel like it's not good is because, and I think it goes for both sides,
Okay.
we should not be treating people as expendable, period.
Yeah.
There we go.
Every
There we
single
go. Yeah.
person
Yeah. Yeah.
has worth, they have value. Even
Yeah.
if that worth or value is not aligned with who you are, that doesn't mean that you treat them as trash or rubbish or another
Correct,
one.
yeah.
Instead, the perspective should be, okay, I see who Jay is. I see who Philosophical is. They're not the right man for me, but they'll be for somebody. So I'm going to be assertive enough to communicate that to them, to not ghost them. I'm so anti-ghosting, by the way. I get on my clients all the time when they ghost. Don't do it. Give people an explanation if necessary. And if you don't want to explain yourself, you just let them know, hey, this isn't working, but I appreciate you. Thank you. And you let them go, right? Which keeps closure. But still, I feel like we're not treating each other fairly, which goes back to your first question about why it's accepted for women to do it, but not so much men. I don't like anybody doing it. I do my best to teach clients about codependency, period, because you have to be able to accept a person for who they are and let them operate in the essence of who they are. And then you decide, can I deal with that for the next 10 years or 10 days or however long it is you want to do it, right? And if not, keep it moving. You don't have to stay. But when you become codependent, right? Normally there's change there. Because if you're not presenting the way I need you to present in order for me to give that response, right? I'm going to do something to try to persuade you to act the way I need you to act. Here's an example in case people are like, what the heck is she talking about? When you're codependent, right? And you're worried about the relationship breaking up, you're going to say things and do things to get your partner to console you, to act and tell you that the relationship is not going to end. So at that point, I'm allowing my insecurity to sway who you are and how you show up in our relationship so that I can feel better and feel, okay, we're good, we're good. That's you trying to change your partner, technically.
Yeah. And it kind of goes into my next question about happiness, right? But you brought up a good point a couple moments ago, and feel like I equate it to instant gratification, where if a man and woman doesn't show up in a certain package at that time, right, they're expendable, right? So my point is that where do you make the determination to the fact that if I'm gonna, like, you are accepting the person, right? But let's be real. Some people feel like love doesn't pay the bills.
It doesn't.
So it doesn't.
Nope, it don't.
So let's get to where does the line drawn to where it's either you allow that person to be themselves and you grow in love, or you say you stick it out and see what this person brings to the table right now that it may not necessarily be in the future, and just keep yourself closed off. Because I think that's kind of what's going on right now, right? It's that's why there's such a rapid rate increase in rate as far as divorces. Such a horrible experience with dating, relationships. I think people are either looking for instant gratification, or it's like, all right, I'll stick it out. He has a lot of money. She has a lot of money. She has a nice job. He has a nice job. Let me see how I can elevate myself. So once I'm elevated, they're replaceable.
I'll add to that as well. I mean, it feels like, for lack of a better term, it feels like we're doing it halfway. Meaning, like, we'll take the part of the lesson that's what I believe the lesson is anyways. We'll take part of it that's what are we, like, hey, I'm doing me, I'm okay, so you go on and live your life. But we're ignoring the part of it that is the attachment part of it, the codependency part of it. We'll leave that part aside. We won't examine that part of it, but we'll internalize the part of, oh, this person isn't for me, so we'll let them go. We'll let them go extremely quickly.